So this murder happens. Also, just to be clear, like, everyone else in the Symbionese Liberation Army is white.
There's one black dude
who leaves almost immediately.
Pretty much immediately.
Yeah. But, like, their core group throughout its history is just all these white.
It's like middle class and then sometimes upper class white people.
Yeah. So there's kind of not a lot going on for the rest of, like, November and December with the SLA. In January, 2 of the guys, Russ Little and Joe Ramiro, are stopped on the Bay Bridge in a traffic stop. And there's a ton of fucking SLA weapons and propaganda in their car. They get charged for the murder of Marcus Foster. It seems like at this time, allegedly Nancy Ling Perry was renting a house in Concord where they were hiding out to kind of let shit cool off after Marcus Foster. Once these guys are arrested, she sets fire to the house, which is not entirely burned down, so we, like, still has a ton of evidence in it.
Also a little presaging what'll eventually happen.
Yeah, exactly. For real. But basically then the SLA, like, fully goes underground, and there's this kind of, alleged police search for them. At that point, that kind of ramps up. And then shortly after that is where we get our big day, February 4th, 1974. Patty Hearst is kidnapped from her Berkeley apartment and her horrific fiance.
Stephen Weed.
Terrible name.
Stephen Weed.
Stephen Weed?
Stephen Weed. You got to look up a picture of this guy because his mustache is insane.
Stephen Weed.
Stephen Weed.
Oh my God. She was fucking Stephen Weed?
Oh, supposedly.
Bro,
They're gonna get
Stephen
married.
Weed is nasty looking. He looks better without the mustache, actually.
Stephen Weed sounds like a pretty scary.
I got to be real with you, Liz. Stephen Weed is probably one of the most fucked up looking 70s guys I've ever seen in my entire life.
He looks like he's on drugs. And not weed.
Stephen Weed seems like a guy I would make up in my head when I was talking to an old person as like what they were doing in the 70s. Yeah. This is fucked up.
He's a really strange guy, to be honest with you. And he ends up putting out a book.
My Search for Patty Hearst by Stephen Weed.
Yeah, that we'll reference later because it ends up tying into the Tribal Thumb stuff.
Well, so she is kidnapped, and I will say, we talked about this yesterday on the phone, but for those who want maybe a wild version of this, I would check out Paul Schrader's movie, Patty Hearst, which I saw, and Paul Schrader gave a talk on like a few months ago. It is a fucking insane psychedelic movie, but she's famously kind of like kidnapped, and it's really, I don't know if we'll ever know exactly what went down there, but from the descriptions that we get from both her and from other people there, she essentially underwent things that were very similar to some of the experiments that were happening at Vacaville that DeFreeze subjects her to.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Patty Hearst is the heiress to the newspaper fortune of the William Randolph Hearst enterprise.
Yeah.
Huge
Citizen
family
Kane.
in San Francisco. Like of the major, there's like 4 or 5 really, really important families that kind of run San Francisco since the early or late 19th, early 20th century. And the Hearsts are definitely like up there with the Gettys, for example. I mean, still
100%.
even to this day.
Yeah, I mean they own the SF Chronicle. I think they might own the Examiner. No, they own the Chronicle. Or no, I don't know if they still do. Chronicle might have spun off.
They don't own. They owned the Examiner.
Okay, well, at one point
William Randolph first bought when he was young the Examiner. That's like their main paper. The Chronicle is a different organization.
I think the Chronicle is the DeYoung paper.
Yeah, and they sell the Examiner in the 90s, 2000s.
Yeah, that's when Sharon Stone's hubby got a piece of it, right?
Yeah, so they don't own that shit
the
anymore.
Hearst Corporation purchased the paper from the DeYoung family in the year 2000.
Oh,
okay.
Yes.
Oh, so they do own the Chronicle
They
now.
own the Chronicle now.
I didn't know that.
Well, they also
Yeah.
have a really cool
Wow.
castle.
They also
They
have an
do.
amazing castle, which I've been to, and which apparently the pool there, not like I went in it, I took like a
You
tour.
can.
You can go
What?
in the pool if you pay a lot of money. but you can
After, if you pay a lot of money after.
So
or
I did think, like, what if I just jumped in here? It's one of the coolest places I've ever
It's
been.
insane.
It's on
Yeah,
Highway 1.
it's
You've
gorgeous.
been?
It's all, yeah, I've been. It's fucking insane.
If you're from the Bay and you got a little chickadee, maybe you're trying to impress, go down, get her to the motherfucking cave room with the Madonna Inn.
Oh yeah.
Make some crazy motherfucking love to her. And on the way back when she's driving, because perhaps you can't, stop off at the Madonna Inn, stop off at Hearst Castle, and you will have yourself a wonderful weekend. I'll tell you that.
Hearst
You
Castle
ever
is
use that urinal at the Madonna Inn that it's like a sheer granite wall and it has like a laser beam and you piss over it and then like the waterfall starts coming down the granite. Oh, it's the most amazing.
I
urinal.
stayed in a room though with a waterfall. Look up the Madonna Inn if you're listening
Yeah,
to
It's
this.
so
God.
good.
If you
It's the
haven't been to
fucking
the Madonna
coolest
Inn,
place
you gotta
ever.
go.
Yeah.
But I stayed in the cave room, which I think is the best room
That's
to
so
stay in
sick.
because it's a really
nice.
crazy
It's a good
shower.
room.
Do they provide the loincloth for you?
No. But actually, when I stayed there, I was reading the collected works of Stalin for some reason. I really remember that.
God, it's
Well,
all
Hearst
connected,
Castle,
my
Hearst
God.
Castle, also just to note, is one of the first places that the New World Liberation Front bombs.
How the fuck did they get up there?
Well, it's not. It doesn't seem like they
bombed
bombed
the
the
property.
Because
house.
it's
but
on the
they-
top of this giant ass hill.
Yeah,
so maybe
they
just
bombed
the
like some
gate.
little way station that was like
Yeah.
part of the zoo or some shit.
Yeah.
Anyways, they kidnap her.
They
They
kidnap
lock
Patty
her in a
Hearst.
closet. She is by all accounts sexually assaulted by both DeFreeze and I can't remember another member of the group.
I think Willie Wolf.
Willie Wolf, I
Yeah.
think, yeah. And through they're making these demands basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all these communiques come out of Patty Hearst reading them
Yes.
with
Yeah.
her voice.
Which is very eerie.
And which are remarkable.
Yeah.
Like you have to hear these things. They're crazy.
I renounce my class privilege, and I would never choose to live the rest of my life surrounded by pigs like the Hearsts. Patria o muerte, venceremos. Death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of the people.
I got Death to the Fascist Insect right here.
Oh my God.
They're fucking crazy.
And this is a huge media. I mean, this is the media frenzy around
Right.
this is you can't
Enormous.
even overstate it. It's like every tabloid, every newspaper,
Yeah.
and not just because the Hearst family is pumping the deaths out, but it was horrible left-wing terrorist group kidnaps beautiful white woman.
The white
that's-
princess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was about to
Literally
get married.
heiress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this black prisoner. It's
Right.
it very much is like male fantasy style. Like she is being ravished by this black prisoner and but as she's reading it, the narrative goes is that she becomes sympathetic or is brainwashed or something happens and she actually stops being a kidnapping victim and joins the group.
Right. Like her first couple communiques are like, I'm fine, by the way. They're all very calm and
Yeah.
measured.
Yeah.
But she's like, I'm fine, don't worry, Dad. Just do everything you're told.
Yeah.
And it's not clear at first what the demands are, but very quickly they're basically you have to feed the masses of poor and hungry people in the state of California.
And I think I remember this is from Revolution's End, so the numbers that I'm trying to just remember off the top of my head right now. But it was something absurd that they were kind of that even the Hearst family just couldn't do.
Well, their first request is actually relatively reasonable, which is $2 million.
Yeah, okay,
And
they
he
can do
does
that.
it. He does it.
Yeah.
They say you need to meet all our stipulations and do these enormous grocery giveaways to the poor of California, all over up and down the state. And in doing this, you'll be feeding people, but we'll also be demonstrating the level of poverty that your pig system has created.
Yeah.
Because all these people are going to come out and swarm the streets for these free groceries. And he, against the advice of, I think, a lot of people, is I'm just going to fucking play ball. I have
Yeah,
the
just
money.
do it.
Yeah.
I want my daughter to get home. I don't want to deal with this. And so he does everything they tell him to. He sets up this charitable organization called People in Need
Mm-hmm.
with $2 million of his own money, which is a lot more now than it is, or then than it is now, obviously.
Yeah.
$2 million.
But even now, it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
money. And what he does is, at their kind of urging, I believe, he staffs it with prominent figures in the radical left locally. That's
Yeah.
who runs this charitable organization he sets up. And we'll talk about this later, but like especially Popeye Jackson, the leader of the United Prisoners Union, basically him and Cecil Williams from Glide Memorial Church, who's this like very prominent left
I know
wing.
who Cecil is.
Yeah,
very famous.
They kind of like run this organization, People in Need, which in a very short time scale, like an impressively short time scale, gets this incredibly huge operation going in multiple cities where they give out groceries to poor people. And the bags have like the Symbionese Liberation Army, like many-headed dragon printed on them.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. We actually haven't mentioned the name Symbionese Liberation Army.
Right.
Is a made-up word, Symbionese. Mm-hmm. It's not a real word. It seems to come from like symbiosis. I forget the official reasoning.
Yeah.
It's like symbiosis people.
Exactly. It's kind of like what the Black Panthers would call like intercommunal, I think. It's supposed to make some kind of statement like that. But the fact that it's a sort of nonsense name, I think, is echoed later in Tribal Thumb, who we keep saying we're going to
I
get
will
to.
say SLA is a much better name than Tribal Thumb.
Much better.
I think I hate the name Tribal Thumb more than I've hated
so
any other
much.
name. A person, organization, place, ever. It sounds like the kind of place that you would have been like, yeah, I had a really bad experience there when I was 16.
Yeah, totally. It just reminds me of this one Burning Man store on Valencia Street.
But PIN becomes a huge thing, and they keep making more and more demands. Like PIN kind of gets larger. It's funny, one of the people they hire at PIN, it's like, actually, we should keep this going even after. Because
they're like, this is sick.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
Because there's a lot of fucking poor people back there.
Yeah, people are hungry, man.
I think the issue of food should be noted too, because that is a through line through all of this.
Yeah.
The Black Panther Party, really one of the main things they did besides the police patrols was they did famously the free breakfast programs, right? The food comes into prominence later with the Tribal Thumb stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think like it's hard to overstate how much cheaper just food is now in general. Like, it's much easier to get food as a poor person. I mean, obviously, there's still hungry people, but like, it's food is just cheaper overall because it's like made out of like nothing corn. Everything's made out of corn now, and anyway. You guys all know all about it. But like, this was like a really big impact on a lot of people.
Yeah. And there's rioting at some of the stations. It's like,
woman loses an eye. Could you imagine losing your eye at this SLA food riot?
There's like thousands and thousands of people pouring in. Yeah, the first one especially, which again happens less than 2 weeks after this demand.
Yeah, they put this thing together immediately.
And they say no cops buy the distribution. And so like there's just like it's kind of a free for all.
They also say top quality food.
Right,
which
good
which
food.
is a
It's
good
expensive
demand to
food.
remember.
I will say that is a good. If you're ever ladies and gentlemen, if you ever kidnap anybody, demand top quality food because they'll try to
top quality everything.
Yeah,
you're worth it.
Hey, you're worth it.
You're worth it.
And after the like first couple distros, they're like, this shit sucks. You need better quality.
Yeah.
But they just keep, and then they're like, give us like $6 million more.
And then
there's like
eventually,
trucks full of hams that get stolen and shit.
Yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah. And eventually, the demands they just sort of keep escalating, and it hits a point where Hearst is like, I can't do this. This is like totally infeasible. I'm rich as hell, but I can't do
like
this.
They were asking for more than Hearst could literally, I mean, as far as we know, could afford.
Right. And it probably is true because he really seemed to just want to play ball.
Yeah.
And then he's just sort of like, we'll just have to see what happens, which is a horrible thing, to imagine going through. And then instead of killing Patty Hearst like they said that they would, or doing something else, a communique is released, that's her voice, where she sounds quite composed. She doesn't sound particularly stressed out or like she's under duress, although who can possibly say? And she says, the People's Forces of the SLA offered to let me go in a safe location, or they said I could join the People's Army and fight alongside them, and I'm joining them.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was an extended preview of the second part of our series with Matt and Matt from Left in the Bay about Tribal Thumb and some Bay Area suspicious revolutionary ferment from the 1970s.
So if you want to check out the rest of the episode, you can do so at patreon.com/TrueAnonPod. That's
patreon.com/TrueAnonPod.
We'll see you there. Bye.
Jeffrey Epstein.